Well, hello, friends. We are so excited. We have something brand new to tell you about. You know how we love books. We are going to be talking about world storytelling today. My name is Debbie Catenacci, and I'm with Dare to Be Curious with my co-host,
Sherrill. World Storytelling Day was a phenomenon that started in the 90s, actually, in Sweden, Scandinavia, many of the Latin American countries. And now it's a worldwide phenomenon. And on this day, March 20th, the equinox, people from all over the world, they get together and they tell stories. And they go all night long. And there's many other ways that they can do it too. There's activities before the 20th, and they go into schools and they take storytellers into the classrooms and senior citizens. So we today decided how we were gonna spend our days before storytelling was putting together this panel of experts for you. Do you want stories? These ladies have them. So stay with us. We have stories for you today. I am so delighted because these two ladies are part of my critique group, and they have been for, this gives away our ages.
30 years.
Oh, Pat!
20 years.
Thank you. And we were very young when we started writing, right? They have been invaluable to help me sell my 19 novels and work on my new projects. Wonderful help, and a couple new projects that I hope that I'll be able to tell you about soon. I'll just tell you a little bit about my friend, Sherrill Jefferson, who we met at RWA.
Yes, we did.
Oh my goodness, yes we did. And Pat, I met her at RWA too. But Sherrill is an award-winning TV and film producer.
Mm-hmm.
She has written both nonfiction and fiction books. And she continues her work today. She's on a wonderful project. She's also very involved. I'm going to let you talk about what you're really involved with, the books you're working on
Okay.
now. And then this lady, what can I tell you? People think, oh my gosh, Sherrill, you've published 19 novels, New York publishers, the whole deal. I said, 19, it's nothing. Well, how many? 120?
No, 103.
103, okay, I'm trying, well, we'll be
Only
120. Pat is a New York Times bestseller.
I started writing when I was 2.
That's right, for sure. And she has won numerous awards. And I always say that you are the quintessential plotter, therefore the quintessential storyteller. So they're going to tell us how they write their stories, because I think it might help you figure out how to write yours.
Right.
So Cheryl, tell us about what your story is about and how you came to it.
Okay, so I've always been a writer. Since the time I was a small child, I was always writing things. And as I moved through my career, producing and directing and writing for various organizations, ABC, PBS, corporate entities, a lot of freelance work, I eventually reached the point where I just had to put something into book form. And I had the great fortune to be teamed up with Dr. Sandra Thomas at the University of Tennessee. And Sandra was then and is still one of the country's leading experts on women's anger issues. And the book is called Use Your Anger, A Woman's Guide to Empowerment. Now, I will say that book was a bit ahead of its time, right? A bit ahead of its time, but it proved pivotal because it then allowed me to get a contract for a book that was about the health benefits of keeping a journal, and then that led to an opportunity to apply for a Wurlitzer Foundation writing residency, which I won. So I left corporate America,
Remember that?
moved to New Mexico, worked on a book there, came home, and Pat said to me, are you still working on that depressing great American novel? And I said, yes, why? She said, stop. She said, there's a big contest. Harlequin is doing something called Red Dress Inc., kind of a sex study thing. I think he should enter. And I said, when does it due? And Pat says,
Tomorrow.
4 weeks. I'm like, really? And what do they need? And Pat's like, well, they need a synopsis, they need 3 chapters. And in my head, I'm just like, sure. Because Pat is pretty irresistible because she gives excellent advice. And any smart professional is going to take her advice, so I did. And on page 2, I turned to my husband and said, I'm going to win. And he's like, oh, sure you are. So long story short, we're on our way back from vacation, and there I have a voicemail telling me that I won. Pat was the first person I called. But the journey after that was, while I really enjoyed winning the contest, I realized that my path as a writer was something a little bit different. So that has eventually led me to working extensively in human rights. So the storytelling that I do, while I'm still working on book projects, the storytelling that I do is really designed to engage big audiences on various human rights issues. And we can talk a little more about that as we go forward.
As we talk. Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. And she has so many great stories to tell. And in our discussion,
Yeah.
we're going to share those
I will.
with our friends, the audience. Pat, all right, in a nutshell, how did you write 103 books? Sell 103 books?
Well, interestingly enough, the first year that I was published, I sold 3 books in 1 year. One was a young adult
I remember
romance
that book.
that won an award, and the editor who read it for the award wanted to buy it. So that was one of them. One of them was with a former writing partner, Linda Sweeney. We wrote together under a couple of different pseudonyms, and that was very fun. It was a fun book, you know, more humor in it. And then I had another one that I had finished that I also published, that was in a magazine. So you know, rather than an actual book, it was in a magazine, but it was the entire story.
Mhm.
So they were 3 very
Different ways of
Yeah.
storytelling.
very different ways. And basically, I don't know, I guess Linda and I wrote for Dell for a while, and I started writing for Harlequin for one of their non-romantic suspense lines. And I did 2 books with them, and then after that I got into intrigue.
Ah,
And so since then, every book that I have written has been romantic suspense or like a thriller with romantic elements or paranormal.
well, you've done some historicals too.
Pardon?
You did some historicals also.
With Linda.
Yeah.
Yes, Linda and I did, we wrote for Harper. We wrote 5 historicals for
I
Harper.
remember those books.
We wrote I think 8 short, mostly humorous, but some had suspense in it also for Dell. And then we started writing for Harlequin, and wrote for Harlequin also, so.
See,
You
there
know,
are
it's
many,
a
sorry. I was
long
just-
path.
A long path, but a wide path.
Yes.
And there are many wide paths to take in storytelling, and we're gonna be discussing those.
So I'm so honored to be with the Masters of Storytelling, and we have wonderful information to share with you. So of course I have some questions for them, starting with, what's been the most satisfying story that you've ever told, and what made it feel so fulfilling?
The most satisfying stories, I'm going to use plural there, that I have ever told have been the ones that created the most positive change, that had the most impact. Writers have different purposes. Some people's purpose is to entertain, you know, to uplift, others to inform. I discovered that my purpose as a writer was to inform people about human rights issues worldwide and in the United States, and then to raise consciousness is the first step towards positive change. So with a background in storytelling and writing, I am the executive producer and founder of something called The Art of Influence: Breaking Criminal Traditions. It's based on a TED Talk that I gave, and we do art exhibits all over the United States, and have spoken at the UN and at many, many conferences, and we use fine art to help people bridge these very, very difficult topics. So where the storytelling comes in is this: each of these exhibitions has huge educational community outreach with it. And when I speak, I approach each speech individually, I approach each topic individually with as much creativity and immediacy of storytelling as I can. So whenever I speak, I start with a kind of, you know, you are there kind of a situation. And the impact of that is huge. Several years ago, 2016 I think it was, we did an exhibit at Kean University in New Jersey, second largest public university in New Jersey, that had a human rights art gallery. And at that particular opening, I addressed the topic of child marriage in America. So the story was a deeply compelling and very alarming one. And so the audience is totally silent, and everyone was totally attentive. It's like, you know, total silence, nobody's on their cell phone. I finished speaking, and there is again, dead silence. So my metric about the power of storytelling in these situations, if it takes a minute before anybody catches their breath or applauds or anything like that, as they're digesting the information, then I know that the story has really had an impact. And so not only has my background writing fiction, nonfiction, scripts and so forth been invaluable in trying to communicate these very difficult topics to people, it has made it an incredibly rich experience to address them, to write about them. And now bringing things full circle, I'm currently working on a series of books, fiction, although everything is grounded in, actual truth, true circumstances, that address these things in a more novel length way. And part of the advantage of that is you reach different people different ways. You can reach some people with humor, you reach other people with straightforward information. Some people, you're gonna have to reach them visually, maybe through a beautiful painting or a sculpture. But there is a whole group of folks who I think are accessed through fiction, book-length fiction. And so that is another arm of the work that I'm doing right now.
It's amazing because a lot of these topics, they're deep, soul-wrenching, and people never wanted to talk about them. It was a hush thing, sweep it under the rug. And now we're talking about it, not just with words, but with art, with stories, with plays, and people are getting their voice. It's giving voice to the voiceless.
Okay, what I was going to say about the impact of storytelling at that particular moment at Kean University, talking about child marriage in America, that we end, and the audience is very skeptical, and so I say to them, fact check me. Here's where you can look, just go fact check. So I came back 3 months later to teach as part of this whole curriculum, and they had formed a teachers group, faculty group, and the head of the group approached me and he said, yeah, none of us believed you. Yeah. He said, so we all fact checked you. I'm like, yeah. He said, so we have formed a committee to advocate for the change in the child marriage loophole in New Jersey laws. And that has happened now. New Jersey is one of approximately 4 states in the country that have a comprehensive anti-child marriage law. So that was a thrilling moment as a writer.
The horrors, and that people fact checked you and they were shocked, because it's shocking, but it happens. So thank you for going out there and speaking the truth of those victims or survivors.
Thank you.
I don't always write human rights stories, but I've done a few, and the one that I did last year is probably, I think, my best book. A lot of times I think what I've just finished is my best book, but this one had special meaning for me. Right around the turn of the century, I read Banished Babies, which was by Mike Millard, who is an Irish journalist, investigative journalist, and it was about the young women who were unmarried and pregnant, who were forced to go to Magdalene laundries run by the Catholic Church, were forced to work like 10, 12-hour days, and after they had their children, they were basically coerced into giving their children up mostly to American couples who were Catholic and approved by their parishes here. So I was like aghast at it because I was raised Catholic. I'm not Catholic now, but I was raised Catholic, and I had never heard about this before. So I really started thinking about it, and then I started fiddling with it, and I decided I wanted to do a screenplay at the time. And then my husband and I and my former writing partner all went to Ireland to do research, and I actually found one of the old laundries, which had been closed by 1996. That's when they were closed. And I found one of them and drove around the grounds, and that became my Castle Meehan, which is my story center in this story. But the story is not just about the past. It is about the past, but it's about the present and the young woman who was an investigative reporter whose mother all of a sudden goes missing in Dublin, and she didn't know her mother had gone to Ireland. She knew she had been born in Ireland, but what she didn't know, and what she finds out very quickly when she goes through her mother's things in Ireland after her mother goes missing, is that she had been adopted. And so she doesn't know how to find her mother, and so she tries to find her birth mother. And so the story is about basically the three women. And it goes into the past. About a fourth of the book is written in the past from Agnes' point of view. And Agnes is the one who was taken off the streets by the Garda, the police, put in a police wagon, and taken to a Magdalene laundry, where basically she was treated really, really badly, but found friends there that one of them is like a lifelong friend. The other one, unfortunately, committed suicide eventually. So you get both sides of the story. You get the story of what happened to them, bits and pieces at a time, and you get how the heroine of the story, Rennie, is actually going to try to find her mother, finds Agna, and then it seems that Agna has been killed. All of a sudden, the people who were connected to these Castlemean are dying, the people who ran it, which means that obviously somebody who had a grudge against them was killing them. So it's a thriller, and it's very different for me, very different from anything else that I have written. I've had a bunch of people read it, to give me comments and tell me what they liked, what they didn't like, and they all think that it's a great story. So I'm hoping it will be published, and I'm trying to not have to publish it myself because I think it needs a broader audience than I can provide it with. And there is a current publisher who has it and has had it for like a month, so I'm waiting to find out.
Well, friends, you know that Sherrill is quite the storyteller herself, an author of 19 books. And we would like to ask you a question, Sherrill.
Okay.
What storytelling accomplishment or legacy would have ultimate significance for you in leaving you fulfilled and satisfied with the impact of your storytelling?
Well, that's actually an easy one. Often when asked that question, we all say, oh, my last book, that was my favorite book. Well, that is not true. It's actually the book that my agent has right now. It's the book that I feel like I've been writing my entire life. It is called The Girl Who Raised Her Mother. Now, our viewers probably, hopefully, have gone to our website, biggest.life, so they know a little bit about my background. And they know that my mother was born with the mind of a child, and my grandparents at the age of 5 told me that I needed to be careful about what was going on in the world, that now God had made a mistake and it was my job to help him fix it. Because through me, my mother would have the life she would have had she been born right. That was the term when I was growing up, if she had been born right. So I did that. I lived through me, my mother had everything she would have had. And perhaps you all, I hope, if you go onto the website, you read an article that I wrote for the Chicago Sun-Times, because a few years ago, a reporter called the then President of the United States a retard. And the Sun-Times called me and said, respond to this. And it was one of those moments where you knew every word. I told my agent, I said, you know what, I'll send this tomorrow, because they wanted to do it quickly so it would be relevant to what was going on in the world. And it was one of those times, as writers, you think, oh, that's the perfect ending, I'll remember it in the morning. Well, no, I got up, I wrote the whole thing. And it really says a lot about my relationship with my mother, and how you get from being a 5-year-old rearing your mother in a little town in Indiana, to how I chose never to be a victim, to do it with love and positive energy. Yes, there were bad times. There were terrible moments, because my mother's problem is that she was overly friendly. So there were men that I had to protect her from. It's really an unusual, powerful, 3-generational story, actually. My grandmother, my mother, and me. So I'm hoping, no, I'm not hoping, I will make it happen. It will have its place in the world. So yes, that is my book that would have the most power for me. I know that all of you have a story in you, at least one of them. And this World Storytelling Day, it really inspires us all to tell story. And I know you have your story. Maybe you have a lot of stories. So we are going to give you a little bit of advice from all of us who have actually told our stories and plan to tell more stories. So, Sherrill, tell us. Give us some advice.
So the first thing I would do is free yourself of any restriction. You do not have to write a 600-page novel. You can write a one-page story. You can write a one-paragraph story. It may be that your story is something you want to present orally as opposed to in written form. But it's very important to free yourself of any of those restrictions. Something that works for me all the time, I never call it a first draft, and I never number any pages. I just sort of let it flow. That way I'm not like panicking, 200 pages to go. So I would really free yourself of that as well. And for any guests joining us today, those of you who are not native English speakers, a big movement in literacy and publishing right now is the idea of language justice and language injustice. So you should feel very comfortable telling your story in whatever language you are comfortable, what the language you experienced it in. And I think the last little piece of advice that I would give is what presses your hot button, either, is something incredibly joyful that you experience or something that really makes you angry, that you think is a piece of injustice in the world that you need to address. So watch for what you respond to in the world. If you may have a story you've always wanted to tell, or you might think, gee, I'd like to tell a story. What could it be? As you go through life, there will be things that you're just going to say, that's it, and follow that instinct.
Okay.
Pat, please give your sage advice because I've always taken it. Thank you very much.
Okay. What I would suggest is to look inside yourself, and whatever kind of a story you want to write, it doesn't matter if it's a romance, if it's a thriller, if it's a science fiction, if it's a fantasy, it doesn't matter. Look inside yourself and put yourself in that story and think about how you would react to things that happen in the story, because the big thing now is the internalization of your characters. How does your character feel about it? Is your character afraid, happy, sad, regretful about something? That's what sells the story these days. So that's what I would suggest, is that you get in touch with whatever character you're writing, what you think their feelings could be that would move you. Because when I write, okay, here's a horrible thing. I cry sometimes when I write scenes that are really emotional scenes because they trigger something in you. They'll trigger, if they trigger it in you, they'll trigger it in other people who are reading it.
I agree, because when I was writing The Girl Who Raised Her Mother, I had to have a facial because I had cried so much writing the story. Thank you, Pat.
Even the story that I'm writing now about the woman who's a dissociative identity disorder, it's another interesting one. It's like in reading parts of it where I started really, and I didn't do this at first, one of the people who was looking at it said, you've got to put what is she thinking about the other character? It's somebody who has got like a split character. It's not a split personality. It's actually like she's two people in the same body. And she's actually more, but they don't know that yet. But once the Annalise, who finds out that there's a Liz that is now acting at night when she has these blackouts and she didn't know what happened, why isn't she thinking about it? Why isn't she making assumptions about what Liz could be up to? What is she doing? How is that going to affect her? How is that going to affect her life? And trust me, when I wrote those, on a couple of them I cried, because that's really difficult. It's difficult stuff to do, but man, is it rewarding when you get done with it.
Well, what an amazing conversation of storytelling. I hope that you enjoyed this as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. And don't forget to like and subscribe. and you will be able to learn more about storytelling by going to the websites. All these books that these ladies have written are available on Amazon. We will have the links below, and we will also have it at the end of this video. So stop the video and write down the website and go check it out. And we will see you next week.